at our we looked at our village resources in terms of staff and the ability to manage the application process and the follow-up processes necessary to have these types of facilities. And we watched that closely as we developed this ordinance and its application process. So there's been no rush to this ordinance. Instead, there's been a lot of thought and a lot of deliberate time taking to see if we could get it right. As we watched ordinances develop with respect to adult use, and I want to make it clear, we are only here tonight on adult use. The village has already formally opted out of medical marijuana facilities in the village. And then after the vote of the people to legalize this industry, the village saw fit to seek wisdom from its planning commission to find a way of accommodating what is now a lawful use in Michigan. So as we were looking at our resources and looking at pending litigation and new litigation, we tried to develop an ordinance scheme that was consistent with the law and as simplistic as we could make it. So this ordinance scheme does require an application process. This ordinance scheme establishes a licensing process. This ordinance pre-selected the location, the geographic turf, the zoning category, if you will, where these types of facilities could be zoned as permitted uses. The location for the facilities is the I-1 zoning district, and we have development conditions in the ordinance. We have a site plan review condition in the ordinance to address the various peculiarities and the general development standards for these facilities. We then have a license revocation process that we believe complies with the due process requirements necessary in Michigan. So our ordinance is not designed to define or limit or cap the number of licenses to be issued. That process alone avoids the need for a competitive process where the village staff would be tasked with trying to pick winners and losers based on various application criteria. So in lieu of the number, we went with a zoning category. So we have pre-designed where the locations can become to be located. We have intended to avoid application timing disputes and to keep the staff from having to monitor who filed first and who got to the planning commission first and what kind of winner or loser would end up in that sort of a race. And we focused on geography, and we picked a geographical zoning category where a facility would be permitted and a controlling application process would be in place to ensure compliance. And we don't link these adult facilities in any way to the medical facility ownership or operation. So the ordinance scheme that is allowed by the state of Michigan could be summarized in 3 words, and that could be time, place, and manner. So we have tried to put forth a zoning ordinance that regulates the time and the place and the manner for these otherwise lawful uses that have come to be approved in the state of Michigan. We have set forth a rather simplistic ordinance scheme. If you read other ordinances, you may find some that are even more simple, and you will find some that are buried in complexity and riddled with lots of processes and application processes and what I would consider to be some very difficult management issues within the ordinances. So our I-1 zoning district is defined in our zoning map. The facilities would have to be located in that zoning category. The facilities would have to provide a completed application. The facilities would have to comply with the general development standards set forth in our ordinance scheme, which range from the control of wastewater to security to light. We're going to talk about odor control, hours of operation. Our planning commission at site plan would have input on lighting and parking and all the other criteria that would be involved in any kind of facility that would come to be located in the village of Oxford. Any approval would have to go through our full site plan approval process. Any application would have to show preliminary state approval. That would mean that the applicants are clearly vetted through the state approval process and through our process. All applicants would have to sign a liability release and show proof of insurance. We would have a notarized acknowledgement of the operational requirements. We would have an application fee that is allowed by law. We would have an annual renewal process with a fee that is allowed by law. We would not, under this ordinance scheme, be creating any sort of a property right. This would be a licensed as opposed to an approval that would run with the land. Again, we've already selected the land. The tail end of the ordinance puts forth a process where we could employ adverse license actions after a license has been granted for continued non-compliance. We've developed an appellate right within the village process involving both the village council and its planning commission. We believe that we have met the requirements of due process under the existing case law and the developing case law within the state on these issues. One of the prevailing thoughts I think that some planning commissioners had and some members of the village council had is that this matter of approving these types of uses within the state of Michigan went to a vote of the people and passed. And therefore, these uses became lawful. And when they became lawful, there is a sentiment that the village should somehow accommodate lawful uses within its village limits. And therefore, the Planning Commission was tasked with developing the ordinance scheme and it's from the beginning and watched it mature to where we are now. I've had some input. The planner has had some input. We've heard from the village staff about, the resources available to manage this type of an ordinance. And we've worked hard to create an ordinance that complied with the comments made by our village staff with respect to their resources to accommodate an ordinance scheme. So that is a general overview. There are ordinances in place throughout the state. There are ordinance schemes that limit the number. There are ordinance schemes that are highly competitive. This is a very viable business, and therefore sometimes the appetite to get a site is tremendous, and likewise the appetite to find problems with ordinance schemes is also tremendous. So we have done our best to monitor existing litigation, existing concerns. I think your village council is well read. I think your village president has read more than her share of pamphlets and materials on this subject matter, as well as all the members of the Planning Commission. And so tonight's an opportunity to hear from the community, and we will be diligently writing down the concerns raised by the community. And it's a chance for the community to speak directly to the village council and to the Planning Commission, who's in attendance in part or in whole, and let us know what you're thinking and let us know what your questions are with respect to where this process is. Just because there's an ordinance before you in draft form does not mean that there's been a conclusion reached by any controlling body with respect to approving this or some version of this. I think the village council has been forthright with me, and I've been forthright with them that we are very interested in hearing what the community has to say this evening. And with that, I will close and allow this process to continue.
Madam President, this is Joe.
Yes.
I just want to touch base and answer one question that Bob briefly touched on about the medical marijuana. Although this doesn't directly relate to it or pertain to that, anyone with medical needs or medical marijuana card can go to a recreational retailing location and obtain what they're looking for. This wouldn't discriminate against them if this was to pass or be put in place. I know some people have had concerns or questions why that wasn't included. Again, that happened at the village here a few years back when that was the only game in town, the medical marijuana dispensary type setup. The fact that it's not part of this is because what you guys are looking at and what this is addressing is the current licenses being authorized and stuff by the state of Michigan. So just want to clear that up for some who were wondering about the medical stuff.
100% true, village manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Madore. So I just want to clarify too, we're talking about a few different permitted facilities. So it's marijuana growers, microbusiness, processors, retailers, safety compliance facilities, or secure transporters. So the entities that could be applying for these licenses within the village could be operating any of those businesses. And, you know, there's no telling which ones would likely come in, but something to think about. So at this time, I want to, we have one member of the public who's raising her hand. So I want to call on you, Ms. Hafele, and then I think I'm going to have Joe Madore go through some of the submitted comments and questions, because we did get a couple of questions right off the bat, and I think that will stimulate even more discussion. So Ms. Hafele, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm Kathy Hafele, and I live in the Oxford. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'm Kathy Hafele, and I live in the Oxford Lakes neighborhood. So I grew up in the generation where they advertise dope. Why do you think they call it dope? It makes you stupid. And so I also am a member of Families Anonymous, and we help people whose loved ones have maybe started with marijuana and moved on to more drugs. Doesn't mean everybody goes to more drugs, but my question is, why do we have to have one, number one? Number two, if people are, I thought I read in the ordinance that people, up to 20 some odd people could be in there smoking. And if people are in there smoking, how do we know they're not going to leave the facility high? Number three, if it's so wonderful and great to have this marijuana facility, why don't we just put it on Main Street next to a beauty parlor, and then it's more visible instead of hidden on Gillespie, and we can watch what's going on? Why are we hiding it? If it's such a great thing to have, why are we hiding it on Gillespie? So I just don't get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Davis, do you want to address the ordinance question that she had?
Well, when her first question was, why do we have to have one? The answer to that question is we do not have to have one. The way this ordinance scheme was set up is that, unlike when it was medical marijuana, if you didn't do anything, then it was not allowed. Under this adult use, we either have to pass an ordinance prohibiting all of these types of uses within the village, or we have to pass an ordinance that regulates them and allows them. And if we do nothing, then they can make application to be in our community without our being involved in the regulatory process. So we don't have to have one. That's the answer to the first question. The part of the ordinance where 20 people are in the facility smoking, I don't know where that is in the ordinance, so I would have to get further direction on that. I think that those were the questions.
Yeah, I don't think that it's in the ordinance. There shouldn't be any on-premises consumption, from what I understand.
Well, that's good news, but if this is all such a great idea, why are we hiding it on Gillespie? Why don't we just put it on Main Street? Are we embarrassed to have it?
Well, I think the answer to that is the Planning Commission took a look at the village as a whole, took a look at distances from residential living zoning districts, took a look at distances from other setbacks that are required in the law, and tried to find an area, a zoning category where the use was best suitable for the village of Oxford. And the Planning Commission's wisdom was that the I-1 zoning district fit that category. Perhaps Mo, as a member of the Planning Commission, you could comment on that further if you want.
You're exactly right, Bob. We looked at distances from schools, distances from parks, distances from a lot of different uses, and chose the I-1 district because of its distance from those locations.
Thank you. So I know that several of those in attendance submitted comments in advance. So I think I'm going to go to Joe Madore. Would you mind starting to go through some of those comments and questions? And I think that will, again, stimulate more discussion. And if anybody wants to kind of sign up next, feel free to mention that in the chat that you'd like to comment, but we will make sure that we get to anyone who has comments this evening. So hold tight as we can work through this.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. So some of the folks took advantage of the online comment that comment form Nicole put on the home page, and we appreciate that. So I'll go through and read them. They're not very long, only a few sentences each. But these are I'm going to read the ones that are from village residents. This is from Josh Blake on Oxford Lakes Drive. He said the people of the state have already overwhelmingly supported the legalization of recreational marijuana. There is no need for the extra bureaucratic nonsense to further regulate these already overregulated businesses. We are talking about a plant, not a nuclear power plant. This plant has been consumed for thousands of years without anyone ever dying. I motion that the village of Oxford simply opts in and gets out of the way so our citizens can enjoy the freedoms God gave us, and then we had to vote for and now have to vote for again. And then I have a Nicole Roble, Scripter Court. And this is the new, for those who aren't familiar, Scripter Court's the new development there right by the water tower, next to the DPW, right off Gillespie. I just moved into a new home on Scripter Park Estates. I'll be devastated if any of this moves forward. I do not want to live near a grow or production facility. I do not want to walk into town with my family and see a shop selling it. It doesn't seem to fit the community here at all, and I can think of so many other businesses to attract to downtown. We will sell our home if any of this gets approved. So disappointed and shocked to hear that this is even a possibility. It has been turned down in so many cities, such as St. Clair Shores, for very good reason. One other person, Megan Haupt from Scripter Court. I am so disappointed that this is even an option. My family and I just moved here in the homes that were just built off of Gillespie. Had I known this was going to happen, I would not have purchased my home. This is a definite, all caps, no for me. Connie Ogg from Burdick Woods Court. She had some questions about the fees and stuff. Number one is the ordinance as drafted has only one option for fees, $5,000 for application and renewal. This dollar amount seems prohibitive for the category of microbusinesses. Currently, the state's marijuana regulatory agency is looking at lower fees for the microbusinesses category, specifically to promote minority-owned and operated businesses. If lower fees become a reality for any of the designated categories, will council be able to quickly adapt the ordinance to reflect a less prohibitive fee schedule? And then two, when does council plan to vote on adoption of a marijuana ordinance? So two questions. And then this is a Michael Vaughn, from 550 South Glassby Vaughn, I think it's Custom Sports. Is there a reason medical production is excluded from the proposal? Seems that would possibly be a better use with more potential jobs. Will police patrols be increased in the proposed area? Will tax increases on the properties contained within the proposed area? Will the village have to add additional staff to work on the compliance? How would any added cost be recovered to benefit the village? And then we have a Janet Mann, 3 questions and 3 sheets, so I'll just read them together. How many licenses will be issued for the sale and or growing of marijuana along Glassby or in the village? And just to answer that in a nutshell, I counted up today, there's like 27 or 28 total parcels in the village that are in the I-1 district. Now that includes the 3 parcels up behind the fire station where the stamping plant is. That also includes the 1 parcel just east of town on Lakeville Road. Initially, those were not part of our the plan for the Planning Commission, but for some reasons, and Bob Davis can speak to those with the setback issues, why those may or may not be in play going forward. Second question from Janet Mann was, will the use of marijuana be allowed around the businesses that are selling the product? And again, follow up to the question that the First Lady asked about. Reading right out of the ordinance, indoor activity only, all activities have to be inside or shall be conducted within an enclosed structure. All outdoor storage is prohibited, and no smoking, inhalation, or consumption of marijuana shall take place on the premises of any marijuana facility. So just to answer those. And last question from Janet Mann was, how will these businesses impact property values? And the market will determine that. I mean, on the front end, I think there's a rush to offer some large amounts to some property owners down there. And one more of these forms that was filled out from a village resident, Tom Schultz, on Lakes Edge Drive. Is this for selling and growing? And again, some of those are for selling. One of those licenses is for growing and some for selling. If it includes growing, I have heard that growing lights can be seen from far away. Again, the ordinance, everything has to be done inside. I personally am opposed to this ordinance. The proposed area in Glassby is right next to a residential area with children and is also close to Scripter Park and a Little League ballpark. I just don't think it's a good idea. Is this proposed ordinance in line with the village's master plan? Can we get some pro and con feedback from the community who have these types of businesses, maybe input from the police chief and sheriff as well? Then that's it as far as those comments. I have a few more from people that came in from outside the village, but I can hold those till later if you prefer. And we did have some letters that were emailed to us today, and 3 of them were from village residents. It's a form letter. I'll read the letter real quick, and I'll just say that there was 3 people that signed their name to them. These are from actually dated in September. Pull those up real quick. Website. Here we go. Okay. The person states, I, Mary Jane Jones, for instance, as a resident of the village of Oxford, support the village council in opting in to allow both medical and recreational marijuana facilities within the community. I stand with the majority of the residents in the village who voted in favor of the 2018 recreational marijuana initiative. Further, I support the proposed zoning ordinance, which would allow commercial marijuana facilities to be located on Glassby Street, as this area is best suited for these facilities and could use some redevelopment. Thank you for your consideration as our community works towards these opportunities and new investments. Again, there was 3 folks. Janet Hall from North Glassby was the second, and the third person was Jason Bachman, I think it is, of North Washington. Those are the 3 that came in via email. That's all I have for those.
Thank you. So I think we can start going down some names in the chat. There have been a couple people indicate that they'd like to speak. So I'm just going to go by the name that you have called yourself in this Zoom meeting. So Morgan Matias, and I apologize because I'm probably going to get a lot of names wrong. But if you're on and would like to comment, please.
Hi.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, my name is Ben Schnurl, and this is Morgan Mathias. We own One Drop Brewing Company, which is a new business that is open during COVID and is located within the proposed zoning district for the recreational marijuana businesses. We'd like to start by saying that we support this measure, and we'd like to thank the Planning Commission for their due diligence as far as drafting this ordinance. After reading through it, we feel that you guys did a really good job, Mr. Davis, and so we support this. A question that we have is in the drafted ordinance, it states that any and all businesses must be located off of Pulaski. The properties that
are zoned I-1 industrial.
That are zoned I-1 industrial, the two buildings that Morgan's family owns and operate in are accessible off from M24. And so
but are in fact also zoned I-1 industrial. So we hope that you would elaborate on that distinction, as well as if it necessarily has to be attached to Glassby Street, even though we are zoned I-1 industrial.
Our buildings are located off from Oakdale Street and are accessible to M24.
So the quick answer to that is, if you look at the ordinance that has now been posted, and it would be page 4, section C2, the permitted district language has changed, and it's open for discussion, but right now it has been changed to include all parcels that are located fully in the I-1 district.
Okay, and another further question would be, I noticed in a portion of the ordinance that you mentioned that a special land use permit that's being used on the same parcel or lot would not be permitted. You would not be permitted to have licenses on the same parcel. Could you elaborate on that as well?
What section are you referring to?
I'm sorry, my computer actually just died and I had the ordinance open with the section and everything. It was talking about special land use and whether or not the marijuana businesses would be allowed in the same lot or on the same parcel that also maintains special land use as well.
Well, when we first started looking at this ordinance scheme, we were contemplating the whole scheme being based on special land use approvals. And then we had some discussion about, if we allowed the entire I-1 zoning district to be available for these uses, would we allow rezonings to take place and or other avenues to try to create more I-1 zoning categories.
I understand.
And I think what we've elected to do at this point is just to go flat out. I-1 zoning district is considered a permitted use. So the concept of having to get a special land use
seems kind of arbitrary
when it's already a permitted use has kind of gone away.
Okay.
I would just like to add a personal comment. I sent this comment as well through the Village of Oxford website. Ben and I both have degrees that are affiliated with biology, plant physiology, environmental science, and both of us believe heavily that the majority of the people involved with these, in this industry in general are just so well qualified and usually very professional, usually very professional people. They maintain themselves and they have to maintain themselves like they do their craft, and this in every way is a craft. It should be looked at as such. It should be a respected it should be a respected industry. So that's all we'd like to say. Thank you for the time, and thank you for taking the time to draft the ordinance.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
President?
Yes.
Joe. I just want to, I think the point that she was making was in under Section 4, under prohibited facilities, it does say for mixed use is prohibited. No other principal use, special use, or accessory use shall be permitted to continue to operate on the same lot, parcel, or unit upon which a marijuana facility is located and operated. And I think that was a well thought out plan that the Planning Commission came up with, and it was in there for a reason. But I think that might be some of the issues that she was wondering about. That's all.
You're right, Joe. That might have been what she was talking about.
Yep, I think so. Thank you. Next, I have Shelley Byfield, and if you can, just state your name and your address, or if you're a village resident, that'll be helpful for us.
Hi, actually, this is James Byfield. I'm using my wife's laptop. I'm a village resident. I live on Park Street. And usually I commute all the way down to Detroit every day. So I come drive an hour just to live in Oxford. And on my way through that, I drive by 8 Mile and I see King Seaweed and all these other places that are retail shops. And not really, I'm opposed to having this being brought to Oxford. So, and I also am a biologist too. Just want to point that out. But I look at this as what I would tell my children, and I have 4 daughters, and what I would like to say, with them is that, no, I don't want them using this stuff, and I don't like it being part of my community. So that would be a big no vote for myself. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Renaud?
That's correct. My name is Ron Renaud. I'm Oxford mailing, but Addison Township resident. My concerns relate to a few things. One major thing is, why is the village acting alone in this and not the township taking it as on their plate? I think being focused only in the village is more of a limitation on what you putting in front of the children of the village, making problems with the downtown and everything else, even though you say it would be in the industrial section. I'd like to know why didn't the township take this on rather than the village, or you guys defer to the township? Also,
Ron, let me answer that question for you, and
Sure.
Hello, because I think I've met you before, and it's good to hear your voice. Ron and I have had other conversations, and I've always appreciated his comments. Ron, we are a separate municipal entity, so we have to deal with this in one of the 3 ways that we've discussed. Mm-hmm. We can do our own local ordinance and get out, or we can do nothing and let it go how it goes, or we can get involved and pass an ordinance and regulate how it goes. So we can't rely on the township. They're a separate entity, and they have to do their own thing, and we have to do our own thing just because we're separate municipal entities.
Understood. But the question here is, why haven't you guys communicated with the township and seen if they are already planning to have such an ordinance also, is my question.
Well, I think to some degree, Joe, we've been tracking the township, right? I think there are some township folks on the line that maybe we can hear from them.
Yes, and I know they, like the village, have a prohibition ordinance in place. Anyone that did want to keep this from just happening, like you mentioned, had to put a prohibition ordinance in place. And so the Township of Oxford did, and I assume Township of Addison did too, put a prohibition ordinance in place. You can go, there's a state website where it lists all those communities. There's 1,773 communities in the state of Michigan, and they all had to make this decision individually.
Understood.
So
If I could
Whether they're
add-
contemplating changing their mind or not, I don't know.
If I could add, your current township supervisor sat on our planning commission through 95% of this ordinance preparation. And he's very familiar
He
with it.
Addison Township, I think he said so.
Yeah, I mean, but you're saying then that the township is in the affirmative that they would want this in the village, is what you're stating then. Okay. Let's move
I
on.
didn't
Not
say
in the
that.
village.
I said the Oxford Township supervisor sat on the planning commission. I'm not going to speak for him. I'm not going to speak for the township. But he's very familiar with the ordinance as how it's been written.
Okay, but like I said, I don't think you guys communicated with the township to see if they're going to act, and it would be probably more beneficial to be on a larger scale like that as far as being allowed within the township, which is 36 square miles. Anyhow, let's move on to a couple other items. The other item I would like to bring is, why is the fine so low for anybody violating it when you got a $5,000 a year renewal cost?
The violations and the penalties, Ron, are constrained by law. We're only allowed to impose certain fines under the misdemeanor rules of the state.
So as it's a misdemeanor, it's kept within those numbers, or is there a higher amount that can be employed?
No, those are the statutory amounts.
Okay. And the next thing is, how are you guys going to protect the children from obtaining any type of marijuana from these sales? And what I mean by that is, how are you going to penalize the licensees? How are you going to penalize the person that purchases? How are you going to do this to protect anybody that's underage of obtaining this?
Yeah, that's a good point, Ron. I mean, the law is pretty clear about the age, and the operations have to respect the age. We have put in a revocation of license action, and these from tracking the litigation and watching other communities, Ron, I've come to learn, and I'm not going to vouch for the industry as a whole, but I can tell you this. These licenses and these permits and these locations are extremely valuable, in my opinion, from what I've seen. And the temptation, to sell to a minor or to even have a questionable sale, I think is very much thwarted by the state and the local governments taking away the license and the right for a very profitable and somewhat valuable market. So this isn't. I don't think that I mean, the law is the law, and it's like anything else. We'll have enforcement in place, and the state has enforcement in place. Will somebody goof up and sell to somebody under 21? I don't know, but I think the temptation is not there to do that. The sale is just not that important to the overall business scheme, as I've come to learn.
That may be a possibility that they never do that directly, but the indirectly is the way I'm talking here also is, say somebody comes in, buys some, and they gift it to a child or somebody that's underage, or gives it to somebody that's, not qualified to have it. How are you guys going to protect that? How are you going to penalize for that? How are you going to do anything about it?
I understand the question now. That's strictly a law enforcement issue. It's the same with liquor. I remember others, not me, of course, who would get somebody of age to buy liquor and then give it to the minors to have fun with. I think that's been going on for a long time. Certainly it went on at my high school a little bit. But it's going to have to be a law enforcement issue. It's and somebody prior to you asked about the $5,000. Well, the statute actually allows you to charge an annual renewal and license fee of $5,000 to help defray the costs of stepping up your enforcement on those types of issues.
Madam President, this is Joe.
I guess he wants to talk to.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, and just to touch base, I had someone else yesterday to ask, well, isn't out in the township a better location for this, all this land? Well, in
Correct.
the state statute, it does say that the state shall approve a license if, and it says the property where the proposed marijuana establishment is to be located is not within an area zoned exclusively for residential use. One. So if you have 10 square miles of nothing but residential zone property, it can't even go in those areas. It would be limited to commercial, industrial type zoning. Same thing here in the village. The same restriction is in place. So that's one way that it does take out a lot of the available property that some people might think is available in a township.
The township has quite a bit of industrial and commercial
Absolutely.
and agricultural. So I don't know how that could be.
Well, if it's agricultural, it's zoned. That's typically residentially zoned as well. But just to follow up on this, so whether this takes place, or whether this goes through, and most of these licenses are for growing facilities only, such as in Orion Township, their approval is only for the growing facility, not for a retail facility. The one, according to the information I was reading in a magazine yesterday. So there's no retail, there's no end user transactions taking place. Aside from all of that, the law that was approved to decriminalize the use and possession of the marijuana, just about anybody in their neighborhood could be legally growing it in their garage or their basement as well. And they could be using it, they could be transporting it in their car. Those are the things that really the law changed for the most part. Makes it legal to own, grow, produce, and use for individuals. So that is this ordinance that is being contemplated here in no way changes that. So I think perhaps there's going to be much more marijuana out there that's under the radar, off the radar, that's being grown by individuals than in a circumstance like this. So I agree with you, though. There's a lot of diligence needs to be made to ensure that youngsters don't get it on either avenue.
Yes, that's the critical here is that there's.
Yes.
You know, we have all these laws for cigarettes, which we've boosted up to, what is it, 21 now to have cigarettes?
Yeah.
So why is it that is not more stringent on this aspect, especially since this is more of a narcotic than cigarettes is?
Yeah. And to Mr. Davis's point, the cost benefit for one of these facilities that may be approved in some community, they have easy $1 million, $2 million invested in their facility. But I don't think those owners are going to take any risk of losing that valuable license because somebody wanted to sell $200 of product out the back door to somebody minor. Well, they aren't even there's more of a risk, I think, for the individual black market type.
And that's what I'm putting towards you is that the aspect is it would be easy to obtain because there's something to buy from, somewhere to buy from. And then that person can go in there and buy it and double, triple, quadruple their money by selling it to anybody on the street. You see my secondary black market situation? That's what I'm worried about.
It's a good point, Ron.
The other point I want to make is this real minor thing. It's a lot of typos, a lot of mistakes within the ordinance and your summaries. If you could correct all that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Ron, you're right. We've had a lot of renditions of this, and we haven't gone to a final format or a final proof on any of it. We've left it open purposely for this meeting, so we will get on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. David Breitner, do you have questions?
Yeah, just to piggyback off some that have already kind of been talked about. One, someone had asked what the benefits were, and just to go off of that, do we have anything in that you guys could estimate on a profit of an establishment like this? What would it mean for the township? I know that if we were going to compare it to the liquor store, what kind of revenue does the village get from them? And if this is more profitable, what kind of profits would we get from an establishment like this? And what would that mean for the village? What could we do, or what would be the plans to use with that additional income?
Mr. Davis?
Well, there is a tax revenue benefit to these facilities. I have not calculated what that would be because we just haven't had a facility or an application. We do get a fairly stiff annual licensing fee. I don't think it makes or breaks the bank, but it is fairly significant when you look at it per license. So the state has a tax scheme in the law, excuse me, that you can go and read, and you can see what revenue would come back to the village by way of a tax benefit. I think the Planning Commission looked at that a little closer. Mo may have some comments on that. But it's not a tremendous amount of money, sir. It's not, it's not a, all money is good money, but it's not going to drastically change, the coffers of the village. But it would be some, and it could go into the general fund.
Yeah, and that's what I had figured. I just wanted to see if there was like a major benefit from a monetary standpoint that would be able to be reinvested into the village rather than having any other business in that same parcel. My other question is, would we be able to create ordinances to prohibit maybe just the retail portions of this current one, and then create an ordinance to regulate and allow more of the transportation safety evaluation type? I think it was definitions like 5, 13, and 14. And maybe keep those that are just non-retail.
We have the flexibility to do that, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking at it from a standpoint like if we were going to get more people to vote one way or another, I think it would be easier to go that direction, at least to begin with, and then change it from there. But that's just my perspective.
Great. Thank you for your questions and comments. Next, we'll go to KK. Indicate that you're a village resident and you'd like to speak.
Hi, yes, thank you. My name is Karen Kamishak, and I live on Maple Street here in the village. I'm glad to see all the work that's gone into the proposed ordinance. It looks like, a lot of due diligence has been done. I would absolutely support this. I think it would be something that would benefit the village and its residents. I would also encourage anybody that is concerned about especially a retail facility to perhaps go and investigate some that have opened recently in other municipalities, like in Ann Arbor or Wild Lake, Oak Park, etc. They're striving, and I can only speak from my own experiences having seen them, but they're striving for, it's very out in the open. It's very heavily regulated. In a lot of cases, they're very upscale. They're really going after a market to make people feel comfortable. This is not something that's being done in the back, of a dark alley somewhere. It's all heavily licensed, regulated by the state. These are business people running these. In a lot of instances, I know too that folks will, give back to the communities in which they do business. So I would just want to encourage folks to make sure that, they have maybe a good idea of how things are currently here in the state of Michigan. I think it's come a long way from what, it was before it was made legal by the vote of the citizens of the state a few years back. And it's, kind of interesting. Lots of folks have made comments about it comparing to alcohol or some other drug, like anything else. It's being regulated by the state. The sale and the growing of it, anything beyond that as far as usage would again be left up to law enforcement. So if you have a good partnership, I think, between your law enforcement and your local businesses, that should hopefully alleviate a lot of concerns that people would have. As far as folks' concerns too about underage minors getting a hold of it and selling, other than what has already been mentioned as far as it not being advantageous to the business to put their license in jeopardy for something like that. You do have to provide ID. All these places are, very heavily regulated. They keep track of who you are, when you visited, everything like that. You physically have to hand over your driver's license. In most cases, well, I think in all cases, scan it. So, I mean, unless somebody's truly going through a whole lot of effort to create a fake ID to take advantage of the situation, they're probably going to find a way to find pot some other way easier than that anyway. So again, I just wanted to say I would be for this. I think that we would be missing out as a municipality if we didn't be open to this idea. And I would hope that it would bring some revenue to the village and some diversification of businesses, whether it's retail or all the way up to the growing or the transport. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking. Nicole Pelletier.
Hello, my name is Nicole Pelletier. I live in the village as well. I live over on Park Street. We purchased our home last year. And if I would have known in advance that this was something that we were going to be thinking about in the village, I wouldn't have purchased my home. I'm going to be completely honest. I purchased my home because I feel safe in our community. I feel comfortable, and to be honest, I wouldn't have purchased it. And it being so close to where my home is a concern. I'm also an educator as well, so my concern is from that standpoint too. I know that it has been said, and I'm going to repeat it, that somebody had said that starting with marijuana and then moving on to other drugs, that is a huge concern. So I am asking for you to please vote no and find another way to get revenue and to build our cute little community. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Prather.
Yeah, hi. I submitted a comment this afternoon, but I think I missed the window of when they got printed out and sent over for listing it at your call, so I'll just say it out loud. I'm 100% in favor of the ordinance as it stands. I think it's well written and will be a great thing for the village. I'm not concerned about it at all. Also, I would like to say, if we look to our neighbors to the south of us, Lake Orion has really embraced so much regarding the use of marijuana and retail. And I haven't been following it extremely closely just because I don't live there and can't take part in voting there. But I think we would be missing out if we didn't follow suit. What was I thinking? I just think, people are going to drive to Lake Orion and make this purchase that they could easily make here. And it doesn't really matter. It's legal in the state now, and if someone wants to get it, they're going to get it anywhere. And I don't also believe at all that marijuana is a gateway drug. That's kind of a scare tactic that I think a lot of people use. I don't think of it as any differently than I do drinking a beer after work. So those are my comments, and I appreciate all the work that you've done on this, and hopefully it passes. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Mr. Huth?
Yes, thank you. My name is Rob Huth. I represent someone with an ownership interest in the I-1 district, and I'd like preliminarily to say that I have been involved on behalf of municipalities, on behalf of applicants and other communities and I haven't seen a process run better than this. You have invited throughout this whole look at the ordinance participation at the planning commission level from potential users, residents, and folks. So A+ to you, and really some things I'm going to use as I go forward in the practice of law for other communities. Well done. One of the comments earlier was, how will we regulate this? How will we make sure that these people with applications granted to them behave properly? And there was a response by the attorney, Mr. Davis, that it's self-regulating, and he really couldn't have been more right. I learned on behalf of another client today that asked a police chief in a community that had recreational sales in 2 years, what kind of criminal activity has he had with respect to those facilities? And he said, none. And the reason is because the stakes are so high. Selling to a minor, allowing people to smoke on the premises, these are the types of things that will cause a license to be lost. And it's clear how hard people fight to get them. So it is self-policing. Your ordinances, you've done a very good job with it, but I'd like you to consider a couple changes. First, with respect to the public parks buffer, you call that in section C2. If you take a look at where Scripters Village Park is in the Oxford Lake Park, if there is a buffer that is not limited by a certain amount of feet from the establishment, it's going to take out a great deal of potential applicants for Oxford. Now, I know there's been a couple different drafts of this, and one of the drafts does indicate that there's a blank, so there might be a spot where you say the facility can be within a certain amount of feet or can't be within a certain amount of feet. But I just ask you to give some consideration to the public park buffer language. And then I agree with one of the comments earlier regarding section 4A. 4A is a provision regarding, it says mixed use prohibited. This is a provision that is contained in many ordinances. And essentially what it says is if you're going to have a marijuana type use at the site, you can't have other uses. And the policy behind that is if you had a 7-Eleven, you wouldn't want it right next door to a dispensary because it could draw a mixed crowd back and forth. Really, in terms of your ordinance, you folks have crafted your way around this. That is, by taking these uses and only permitting them in the I-1 district, the mixed use prohibited provision is not necessary because you're not going to have that type of activity, foot traffic near these sites. They're an industrial district. The other glitch with this is if you take a look at the buildings on Gillespie and in your I-1 district, you'll notice that they're large industrial buildings. If you have 10 or 15,000 square foot buildings, you likely don't want only a marijuana use there because it would be a facility that's way too large to be effective for a retail development. So I agree with the intent. I understand why this provision's in there, but you did a fine job. So 4A is not necessary anymore. And in fact, I think it might run counter to what you're trying to achieve there. All in all, though, I applaud you. Well done. Thank you for hosting a town hall meeting. Most communities don't want to take the time for this type of thing. And I think you're getting some good comments tonight. So thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Kelly Arkles?
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, great. So no, a lot of great comments. So first, I want to thank the Planning Commission. Prior to me, I'm a new member as of just a couple of weeks ago, and the Village Council, Village Management, and of course, Bob Davis for all the time you guys have spent on this draft ordinance, the due diligence involved. I am so thankful to hear of the different options and why we're going this path and even creating one. And I truly appreciate Bob's introduction in terms of focus on time, place, and manner. So the first thing that I want to state, and then Bob and Kelsey, I'd like to ask a question after I make the first comment and have you answer if you guys don't mind so that I don't ramble too much forward. one of the things that I keep hearing is that because there was a majority in the vote in the village saying yes to legalization of recreational marijuana, I am one of those people that said yes. However, I do not believe that that means that that should be open to every single parcel, any place. There's a time and a place and a manner for everything. So my first question would be on Section D, general use requirements, number 5. With it only being indoor, could one of the facilities have a greenhouse erected? And would that be considered indoor use only?
I'm looking for that.
Which, Kelly, what section did you
Section
refer
D,
to? I apologize.
general use
D5.
requirements. Yep, D5.
Oh, D5. I'm sorry. I thought you said,
No, D5. So indoor use only. So my question is, in replacement of a current warehouse, so if someone were to come in and they were going to, and I'm especially talking about a grower at this point, they were to come in and say, we're going to buy this piece of property, we're going to demolish the warehouse, so closed-in walls, closed-in ceilings, and we were going to build a greenhouse. Would that be allowed, and would that be considered indoor use?
I don't know as I'm sitting here, Kelly, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how that would be resolved as being an enclosed structure. I'd have to look at that further. I don't necessarily think that all greenhouses are in fact enclosed structures. But I understand your question, and I will look at that provision more closely.
And the reason why I asked that question is because if anyone's aware of the situation happening in the Leamington area in Ontario, which granted, I understand is far more massive in terms of the amount of acreage, their greenhouse, the lighting that they need to utilize to effectively grow that marijuana is causing lighting pollution that is being seen in Ohio and Michigan. And so my concern is, how would we eliminate that possibility here in the village?
Well, I think we would have to further define enclosed structure. Joe, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point she makes, because over the years I've had a lot of involvement with people doing enforcement on patients and caregivers doing their grows, and the law there stated that had to be an enclosed, locked facility. Well, a fenced-in area with a lock on it qualified as an enclosed, locked facility, and even an outdoors. So I could see how someone could think an enclosed structure, a greenhouse would meet that requirement. So perhaps we would change it to an enclosed building, a building that meets building code or something like that, if you wanted to eliminate that. Because I had heard that comment about the lighting, and I was wondering how, if they're indoors, that the lighting is getting out, and if they're outdoors, why would they need lighting? But now I see.
Yes, and the thing that concerns me about that is they didn't have lighting requirements or regulations prior to these facilities being built. So once they happened, because again, this is also new, once it happened, I mean, residents obviously live it. There's been a lot of press in the past few months in terms of where that lighting is being seen, that light pollution is being seen. And now these communities, these municipalities have to go back and create amendment bylaws, and understandably so, from the owner's perspective, the growing owner's perspective, I mean, they're upset because they're being forced to now spend more money to encapsulate and close off that lighting feature, but then the residents are dealing with an exorbitant amount of light. So that's one thing that I was very concerned about. My next question is, and somebody already touched upon this. I mean, right now, we don't really have any true idea of what the positive economic impact would be on our community. I also don't know, what assurances do we have about having any negative environmental impact on our community? I mean, because this being said, that parcel is industrial, but it's still bordering so closely in proximity to residential, the park, our water supply. And do we have the resources available to be able to monitor and mitigate anything that should happen?
Well, Kelly, I can tell you, I haven't read any studies or seen any reports that indicate that these types of facilities negatively impact property values in the area in which they're located.
And my
I have
question's not
seen.
so, and Bob, my apologies for interrupting. My question isn't so much so that I'm not concerned about anything bringing a bad element here. That's not my concern. Again, I am somebody who did say yes to legalization of recreational. I just am concerned about environmental impacts to the surrounding areas, which are very close proximity to residential, water, and our park.
Yeah, and we put in. I think you see on page. We do address wastewater, and we refer to the village engineer with respect to the contents and the impacts on the wastewater. We could probably bolster that section up a little bit in reaction to your comments.
Okay. And then my last question, and my apologies, I'm trying to be as concise as possible. My last question would be so Bob, you made a comment in terms of, we originally had buffers like 500 feet around schools. There's an open space for the buffer around the park. And, how enforceable are our specific buffers?
Did you say how defensible are they?
How enforceable are they?
Okay, so the reason that the one buffer that is in the ordinance, that's the longer paragraph, that's taken right out of the law. The law puts forth one buffer that you're allowed to have, and we have that one in there. And then the law does allow you to create other buffers and other rules as long as they're determined to be reasonable. So when we were looking at the buffer from parks, I haven't seen. I've seen other ordinances that have park buffers. I haven't seen any that necessarily have 500 feet, and I've also seen them altered so that the buffer was measured from the property line to the common entrance to the park, not to the property lines of the whole park. So I called attention to that buffer because of our overriding concern that we don't create any ordinance provision that is a red flag and gets litigated as being an unlawful buffer. So right now we have the one that is definitely in the law, and we're open to discussion about the other one. And that's kind of where we stand right now. I was hoping to hear some comments with respect to those buffers. We had one, there was one litigation, Kelly, in the state of Michigan where a community basically enacted an ordinance allowing the use. So they felt good about having an ordinance that allowed the use, but then they buffered out all the uses.
Yeah. And
so,
then,
that was, and that got litigated, and obviously, that was a contrived ordinance that basically created a right, and on the same ordinance took it away. And I don't want to get accused of that in any way.
Sure. And Bob, that makes absolute sense to me. And, and I was reading, I tried getting access to the village of Lake Orion. And my understanding is that they recently approved both recreational, the village, not just the township, but the village did, for both medical and recreational. And so when I was reading their version of the leader, it stated that they have buffers for within 200, that they cannot be located within 250 feet of a single family residential home or multifamily residential zone district, within 1,000 feet of a school, or within 1,500 feet of a church or park. And so, even the village of Lake Orion, I understand, be larger than we are as the village of Oxford. So I can see how easily those buffers could then further eliminate. But then that just bodes the question to me, is this the right place for this? And do we have enough faith that we have enough ability to regulate under the law that mitigates our risks that I feel that we are taking at this time? So that, I guess to end this so that I don't waste any more time for anybody, my concern is I don't believe this is the right time. I feel like there's so much more that we need to learn, considering the fact that these parcels of land are just like so close to established residential park facilities. And it's not a knock on what that could do. In terms of, I'm not afraid of it bringing a bad element. I'm just wondering if we're the right place for this. So I'll end my questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Councilperson Ross, you have had some people contact you that would like to make some comments that I believe are in this meeting. Do you want to call on some of those names if they haven't been recognized yet?
Yeah, so I think it's people who are calling in by phone because there's no way for them to raise their hand or comment. So right now I'm only seeing 3. So kind of how we've done for other meetings, if it's okay just to go by the phone numbers, and if they want to comment, let them comment. So 248-804-2966.
Okay, I just sent them a message to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 This is Chief Mike Stowald with the Oxford Village Police Department. You chime me in. But I will comment as a resident as well as the Chief of Police. I am opposed to any of these facilities. I think it's kind of a cram in between residential areas and the little, less than 2 square miles that we do have in the village. And I just think that there's other larger areas that would be able to accommodate this better than I think the village can. With that said, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. 248-505-3447.
Hi, this is Trevor. Yeah, I would like to say a couple words if possible. So village resident, first time listener, first time caller, thank you for having me. My goal and the few things that I wanted to say is more just to play devil's advocate and to kind of restate some of the things that have already been said. With a lot of this, I'm not looking to change people's minds because honestly, a lot of the people that have grown up with the mentality of marijuana being a gateway drug, a dope, all that stuff, they're not going to change their mind. But I heard a lot of great comments regarding why do we need it? Why are we hiding it by putting it in the specific zoning that's suggested? And my comment on that is we're not hiding it. It's a strategic zoning recommendation placed forward by whoever did. And just to compare, the local brewers that are in Oxford, not necessarily the village, but they're also in industrial areas, not right on the main street. And we've already talked about some of the similarities between marijuana and alcohol, whether it's the use, the sale. And then the police, it's not the job of the village council to discuss what happens if the sale to a minor, or if somebody were to use it in public, or driving, or leave the establishment while high. There's other entities in place to address that if that arises. I think some people are also looking at it as this would be an attraction to Oxford by passing it. It's not necessarily going to be an attraction. It's not that we're changing Oxford's motto to come to Oxford where marijuana sales and regulations is legal or accepted. I definitely agreed with the comments that the marijuana business is a craft in a very respected industry, and that it's not just a back alley industry. It's not just run by a bunch of yoo-hoos and outlaws looking to cause havoc in our town. It's craftsmen and businessmen and women looking to conduct their business. And I think that, again, if this is passed, in no way is this encouraging the use or advocating the use of marijuana any more than a liquor store is advocating the use of alcohol just by its sales or just by its manufacturing or anything like that. And then lastly, just how are we going to protect children from obtaining it if it is a sales front store? You're not. And that's not our goal here. I think most of the people on here, the call are adults, and a high probability that many of them experimented with alcohol as minors. And the way they obtained it was probably the same way that some of these children in any community are going to obtain marijuana, but that's not what we're looking at right now. I really appreciate like people have been saying, the diligence and the attorneys for offering the real world and sensible outlook on the application of this. And I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly, is Kelly Arco still on the line?
Hi, Bob.
Anyways,
No, sorry, I was talking. No, I'm on. I'm sorry, I was talking and I was on mute. Sorry.
Anyways, circling back, I just did some research under the state case law interpretations and otherwise. Greenhouses are not indoor uses.
Okay, so then we would be able to say from a site plan review that if anyone were to propose a greenhouse, we can say no.
It's not an indoor use.
Okay, thank you.
So I think there was only one other phone number that I saw, and it's an 810 number. So 810-441. I don't know if that's one of us or not.
Yeah, 0814, I see it. I sent them a message. I can't unmute them. They would have to unmute themselves.
I'm not hearing anything yet, but we will come back to you, number 810, if you do want to make a comment.
I did get a message from that Mr. Matt Barron, whose hand is up, and he did message me as well, I see.
Yes, hello, hi.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Barron. I think that the legalization of adult use marijuana is a great thing for the village of Oxford in terms of economic prosperity for the village itself. I am concerned with the proximity of the I-1 district to those residents and the neighboring community. And I think that the village should work with the township to establish a better location, not within 500 feet of the residences, which are close to the I-1 district. So I think it would be foolish of the village of Oxford to pursue this without cooperating with the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, do you want to clarify our relationship with the township, just so everybody is on the same page with that?
Well, I mean, I know everyone knows that the village, is within the township, but we are separate municipal entities for these ordinance purposes. We have to act as a village. The township has to act as a township. Now, there's nothing that prohibits conversations between the two communities who get along well, obviously. But the township cannot satisfy the legal requirements of the village, and the village cannot satisfy the legal requirements of the township. So I don't know if that clarifies that, but that would be the law.
Thank you. Nathan Shevik?
That's correct. I sent in a written statement, but you don't need to read that now. I would like to commend you on the ordinance. I think it's great. I represent a couple of businesses that are interested in Oxford. And, as somebody who has been involved in the litigation elsewhere, I think that, you have done your homework and protected yourself very, very well. And the other thing I would like to touch on is, the idea that children are, going to be getting product from these facilities. I think you need to think of these facilities more along the lines of casinos. The attorney was right earlier. These are very valuable licenses, and the state is very strict. They have, levied 6-figure fines on multiple businesses this year, and they are not risking those. The more potential for people to get this substance illicitly is in the unregulated 10-plant grows in people's homes that nobody has to know about. So I think that when you put it under the cover of light, you make it regulated, and that's the way to do it. And I would just like to commend you guys on your process, and I think you've done a great job here.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I think I am at the end of the list on the chat. So I'll, if anyone else has comments, please feel free to speak up at this time.
Looks like there's people raising their hands in the video.
Okay, let's see here. Oh, Mrs. Petrowski.
I don't see her with a hand raised. I only see, none now.
I think she's trying to unmute herself right now. So we'll just give her a moment here.
You can try to hold down the space bar. It might work temporarily.
Well, Madam President, I do happen to see your counterpart from Oxford Township on the line. Perhaps he wants to chime in.
Mr. Curtis, we'll see if Ms. Petrowski can get herself unmuted. Mr. Curtis, do you have any comments?
There we go. Do I have any comments? I have a lot of comments. Sat early in on the development.
Is this Jack Curtis?
Yes, it is Jack Curtis. Hello, Robert.
All right, I'll stand up. Thank you.
Okay. Notice I have my flag in the background. I sat in early as the liaison from the Township Planning Commission to the Village Planning Commission when we first started going through this ordinance proposal. And we have to remember one thing: regulating growing, distribution, transportation, inspection, all of the different avenues of revenue stream through taxation that would benefit the village. We also have to remember the fact that unregulated, allowed growing can occur right next door to the high school. It can occur next door to the elementary school. It can occur right next door to the middle school. Every school, church, and playground has homes next to it, and anybody can grow 12 marijuana plants right next to those facilities. Regulating it to the industrial area limited the exposure, putting the buffers in. It's a tax revenue stream that's regulated through LARA, and putting it in the industrial area, keeping it away from everything else. We were trying to be good citizens. If the village elected not to do it, you can go 3 miles down the road and still buy marijuana. Adult use cannabis is being proposed at the old Broadway Grill, where the building just sold for several $1 million. There's a lot of money in this. We watched little towns like Kalkaska, Michigan, go from dirt poor to all totally revitalized through the revenue stream. Just like alcohol, the state regulates it, but we don't even know what regulations alcohol does to our community anymore. You now buy alcohol in gas stations. Imagine that. I drive up, I get gas, I can get alcohol. So you're regulating something that's legal to a district that's industrial, keeping it out and away and buffered from schools. But you have to remember, this stuff is legal and all citizens can grow 12 plants in their yard. I estimated on my street alone, we could grow 100 pounds of this stuff and it would be untaxed, unregulated, and still available for all our children to look at and possibly steal and take over. But here with these regulations, you've got it confined to an area, you're watching it, the state's watching it, and really it's out of sight almost from the rest of the community. So that's where this went when we first started the ordinance. And I know through COVID, a lot of it was not talked about anymore. So it's interesting to hear all the hands raised now and listen to the comments. I currently sit in the supervisor's chair in Oxford Township, and I had 3 calls today regarding dispensaries and grow operations. I had 1 visit this morning, and I have 2 people left messages on my phone. It's a big industry, and it's waning fast as far as people getting the capture of these tax dollars generated from the revenues. So look at it with an open mind, because it's all around us and it's even closer than we think, and you won't be able to regulate it.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jack.
I think Mrs. Petrowski is available now, and then I'll go after her to Mrs. Hathaway. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Sorry about the delay. I would hope that the village would opt out totally. Yes, we would salivate, I'm sure, at the revenue stream to the village. And, you know, this is non-judgmental. I realize that anyone can grow, but there are unintended consequences. And some of those unintended consequences are really serious when it comes to accessibility to children. And this is not just retail sale. I'm talking about curious youngsters who find hidden stash, enticing gummies, candies, etc. They find stash at home from grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, whatever. And if we consider the medical impact on kids' brains, it's really something to consider about focus, reasoning, motivation, depression, etc., even psychosis and crime. So these are unintended that kind of hit the schools. I mean, in terms of the teaching and learning impact, teachers' jobs are difficult enough without kids having memory problems, focus difficulties. It would lead possibly to truancy. What do bus drivers endure? I think there's a lot of unintended consequences to the schools, businesses, the workforce. Do we want a drug-free, reliable, productive, and local workforce? And health facilities. I mean, we look at hospitals and clinics. I mean, there could be increased accidents and detrimental impacts, as I said, on kids' brains. I mean, are we going to have an increase in tax-supported facilities for rehab for young people? Children who get a hold of the stash that is available. And I just think we're sending the wrong message if local governments encourage the marijuana industry, even though it's legal. Specifically to local government, and I'm almost done here, I think that the growth in our government budget with the increased budgets that may grow with police enforcement of the industry, we mentioned, you know, the law enforcement, that it falls on their shoulders. fire and rescue, cleaning up after accidents, possibly DPW. We're going to need more inspectors to regulate, and court costs may increase. I'm just wondering about our bond rating. Does it send the right message? Risk management, insurance and expenses. And what about the value of our homes and businesses? I think it sends the wrong message. I believe that Auburn Hills disallowed totally the pod industry there. And yes, we do have a huge facility in Lake Orion. And so does the little village of Oxford and the township, do we really think that the tax revenues that stream in are going to outweigh the increase in our local government, the growth in our government budget? I could go on. Water quality, Kelly addressed that. Air quality. Bessemer, Michigan has air quality problems. So I really wish that we would opt out. Thank you so much for your attention, and I applaud you on the process as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Hafley?
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for all the work they've done. And thank you, Kelly Arkels, for your comment. I like what you said about that it's too close to people's homes. And I just want to add that I have a friend whose son ate marijuana and still does, and he has psychosis, and this is real. And I'm sorry, I have to go now.
That's okay. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything additional in the chat, but I recognize not everybody can participate in the chat. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment or ask a question? Ms. Ogg, Connie Ogg.
Yes, thank you very much, Kelsey. And thank you to everyone who participated in this long project of getting an ordinance that we could study, and hopefully you will act on it as quickly as possible. I am totally in favor of this. I've waited 50 years. I was a child of the 60s, never tried marijuana then. I'm ready to do it in my own town. I don't want to drive to Lake Orion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam President, this is the planner Ortega. I have a piece of information for you if you like.
Yes, Mario. Hello. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Mario.
Hey, Bob. How are you? I just wanted to point out we had about the discussion revolving paragraph B4A, the prohibition on a mixed use on a piece of property. The thought process behind that was that that this was our first attempt at an ordinance, and so we wanted to introduce these uses at some type of defined rate. And so the paragraph would prevent existing structures from being sectioned off into multiple potential tenants. So for example, a 20,000 square foot building could be parceled off, unitized, if you will, create different units, create 2,000 square foot units within the building. So then you could have 10 potential locations for 10 different medical marijuana facility, adult use marijuana facilities. So in that case, there could be, 10 different provisioning centers within one building. So the idea was to try and allow for just one operator per one piece of property. This ordinance, we discussed about lot splits and potential lot splits of people doing that. And the ordinance, we decided not to overregulate that point and allow the real estate market to be governed by market factors. And so if a lot split occurs, that would occur. But the idea was for the existing structures to not be compartmentalized, if you will, into multiple locations within an existing building. So that was just the thought process behind B4A.
Thank you, Mario.
Bob,
Go ahead, Bob.
Mario, Bob Davis here. Maybe you and I could talk about that provision and bring some more clarity to it to be, more consistent with what your thinking was, because it could use a little tweaking. So I'll call you on that one, Mario. Thank you.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Go ahead and speak up, and we can recognize you and let us know if you're what your name is and your address, whether you're a village resident.
Again, I don't have anybody muted. If they're muted, it's on their own accord, so they should be able to unmute.
Okay, I'm just going to scroll through here and see if anybody is indicating that they'd like to speak.
Kelsey, it's Kelly Arkles again. Do you mind if I make one more or ask one more question?
Sure, Kelly, go ahead. Thank you.
So, and my question goes to Jack Curtis. So, Jack, I fully commend all the time and effort, and I agree with, in terms of, your thought process on this. But I guess my question to you is, first of all, the township has opted out, correct?
Yes, they did.
And then I guess my question to you on that is, with the township opting out, if you feel comfortable answering this, why do you feel that the village should not opt out?
Well, it was two separate and different bodies that opted out and opted in. Number one, the previous administration took a vote at a time when it was the Wild West. Laura hadn't cemented down any of the rules. Warren hadn't gone through the extensive lawsuits. The towns didn't realize what the tax structure was at the time. So the township board at that time, I believe, voted to opt out until some of these lawsuits got cleared up. Some of the laws were more defined. Why did the village council opt in? I can't answer that question, but they did choose to opt in and send to the planning commission at the time the challenge to come up with an ordinance that would regulate adult use marijuana.
Fair enough. Thank you. And then my last question would be I think this would probably go to Bob Davis. If the village council decided to opt out now and not do it, what would happen if once we learned more, could we opt in again?
Well, if we wanted to opt out, we would have to pass an ordinance to opt out. Your question is if we opt out, could we later opt back in?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Correct.
Before I say yes to that, which I would want to say, I would want to get you a for sure answer. So I will get back to you somehow with the direct answer of that.
Okay. Thank you.
My preliminary thought is yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Jack.
And Kelsey, this is Joe, if I could just add one bit to that.
Absolutely.
The village currently has a prohibition ordinance on the books and on the record at the state of Michigan. The only exception to that is our ordinance has a sunset clause that says after so many days going forward, that prohibition ordinance will expire, and either an ordinance that is in place to regulate will take over, or nothing will be in place, and it'll be, to use Jack's words, the Wild West. But currently, the village has a prohibition ordinance in place similar to, 1,500 other communities in the state of Michigan. And you can go to the state of Michigan, there's a website, I think it's under Lara, where you can see the list of communities that have prohibition ordinances in place.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to make a comment at this time? It looks like everyone is muted, so if you would like to speak, you're going to have to unmute your phone or your computer to do so. It looks like
Morgan Matthias.
Yeah, let's go back to them.
Hello.
I want to know if they're in a brewery. Is that the brewery? It looks like the brewery.
Yeah, this is One Drop Brewing Company. My name again is Ben Schnurl. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. These have been some hard times launching a craft business. We have some experience in launching craft businesses in these I-1 industrial areas as we've kind of struggled through this pandemic time. The news of this being voted on definitely rose our ear because of our unused building that's adjacent to our property now that is in the proposed district. Some background from me, I'm originally, my family lives in Colorado. So being somebody that's watched these legislations come and be passed in the state of Colorado, I can tell you firsthand, you know, when I go back to see my parents in Evergreen, Colorado, and my sister, these businesses have done monumentous things for the community. The tax revenue that they've created has rebuilt schools, has built roads, hundreds of millions of dollars, 140 million in tax revenue this year pouring into schools. This, especially in this time of unsurety as far as the schools and our kids being remote, needing technologies to make these things safe. This revenue is crucial for our community. It's crucial to fund all of the adaptations we have to make due to COVID-19. And it really is going to affect how all of our municipalities move forward as we address crucial things like infrastructure that are happening in the next few years. It's great that the road has been completed through Oxford through this pandemic period. We've seen new things stimulate new businesses, and much like the craft brewing industry, I feel like craft cannabis is also going to be a serious draw to our community. It's happening up north, it's happening in Traverse City and in those areas very successfully. These facilities are much like was mentioned, are extremely expensive facilities. So therefore the responsibility, not to mention the testing that goes into this product has never been done before. The product that is coming to market is safer than it's ever been. It's tested through third-party labs for heavy metals and contamination. So at this point, having a safe stream, you know, like in comparing it again to alcohol, you wouldn't want there to be a massive garage brewing sort of scenario underneath a state license that exists. So having a state license that does exist and has been voted on, it's crucial at this point that we implement these sort of ordinances and move forward.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to comment? Matt Barron?
Hi, yes, sorry. So back to my point, I agree with what the guy from One Drop just mentioned. I think the tax revenue would be great for the village. I am concerned with the residences surrounding the I-1 district, those property values. So I do think it would be a great idea to maybe consider diverting some of that tax revenue to subsidize any property loss value due to the proximity to the I-1 district close to these cannabis facilities, if that were to occur. Some sort of insurance for those homeowners that have, I guess, no say in this at this point, but just because of their location, they do not have to suffer the economic loss on their property value. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, this is Joe.
Yes.
I just want to touch base on people have mentioned tax revenue, and my understanding of the excise tax, it is collected at the sale, and it's so the sales are only done at retail selling establishments. So those establishments that may be just grow facilities or testing facilities and things like that would not have an excise tax being generated. all that excise tax, of course, goes to the state of Michigan, and they keep the vast majority up front, and then they dole it out on a per capita basis as to, I believe, how many retail establishments you have in your community. So I just want people to understand that, 4 or 5 big drops go in, and over there is, to my opinion, or my understanding, there isn't any tax revenue other than the normal property taxes. But there isn't any of the excise tax being produced or generated from a grow facility. It would strictly be from the retail establishments.
Joe, this is the planner Mario. I can provide more detail if you like.
Sure.
So under the MRTMA, the Michigan Regulation and Taxation Marijuana Act, there is a 10 cents excise tax on only the sales of marijuana in provisioning centers or retail establishments. Of that 10 cents, it's broken down in the statute as to where they go. They go to a certain percentage goes to the state police, a certain percentage goes to for education, and the local municipality receives one penny from that 10%. So on $1, if you have a 10-cent excise tax, you have 1 penny allocated for the local municipality. That gets collected by the state. The state puts all of the that revenue from all retail locations in the state into one pot, and then no pun intended. And then that money, if the state legislature authorizes it annually, can be distributed to the municipalities based on the number of provisioning centers, or retail locations within the municipality. So the dollar amount isn't necessarily based on the percentage of sales, I believe. It's based on the number of retail locations located within a municipality. Now, the MRA, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency under LARA, has the ability, I believe, to refine that process, but I don't believe they've taken that into account. So right now, what's in the MRTMA would regulate where that revenue goes.
Mario, that's 100% correct. And that's why earlier when we were asked questions about, what would be the expected revenue, it's difficult to answer because we don't know what the market will bring under this ordinance in terms of how many provisioning retail centers versus growers versus transporters. We just don't know. So we can't, it's tough to give that answer.
Correct. Yeah. The only thing we can say is what's in the state statute, and might be estimates and considerations out there, but they won't be accurate until this revenue is shared.
Right. Thank you for the clarification and explanation. I'm inclined to move to get council's comments and feedback and questions, just so the public has an opportunity to kind of hear what your council members are thinking as well. But I'll do one last call for public comment now, and then if anybody has anything else they'd like to talk about, even after council, we'll get back to you too, because I want to make sure that everyone who wants to speak tonight can speak. So is there anyone else from the public that would like to make a statement or ask a question at this time? And I'm not seeing any.
Petrovsky.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name's Ron Petrovsky, obviously Evelyn Petrovsky's husband. I've been sitting alongside her here and listened to the entire meeting, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate all the work that you have put into attempting to do this as well as it can be done. Let me start out by saying I'm totally opposed to our community accepting legalized marijuana businesses in our particular village. And I know it's recreational and in use and so on. And, I believe that people have rights to do anything they want personally, as long as they don't infringe on other people's rights. And I'm not at all opposed to marijuana in general. It is legal in the state of Michigan. But just because it's legal throughout the state, why does our little village, our family-oriented village, small town atmosphere, which people want to flock to when they're looking for a good place to live, why should we court the industry. I don't think it's necessary. Available pot is wherever anybody wants to buy it, whether we accept it or not in our village. I think it sends the wrong message. I also think, having heard our local police chief indicate he was opposed, to me, that speaks volumes, and I think we need to pay attention to his opinion. After all, he's the guy that we depend on to keep us safe, and he knows how crime and criminals operate and act, and I think that the potential of this business increasing crime certainly exists. I just looked up the facts on Colorado, who somebody spoke eloquently on, and I know there was a lot of advantage in Colorado for tax revenue, opportunities for jobs, businesses getting help, schools getting built. Well, while they're building schools, I have to wonder how many children and how many families are in the process of being destroyed because of the fallout of marijuana use. And lastly, in Colorado, they're currently looking at the figures because now they've come in. In 2016, they had a 12.5% increase in violent crime compared to the national average of 5%. Now, I'm not saying that's caused necessarily by marijuana businesses. However, it certainly didn't help. I think it indicates that there's things that we may have to pay attention to that have not yet come to light. And based on that, the governor, who was originally opposed and then accepted the marijuana businesses in his state because that's what his constituents asked for, he is now considering the possibility of taking back that opinion and trying to delegitimize marijuana. Now that's in process. They're looking at it. But I think we don't have all the facts. Why do we need to jump in with both feet? I like the idea of sitting back and waiting. If it's possible to opt in at some later date when we have more facts at our disposal, I think that would be worth considering. But I do think that we have to consider the fallout. And Colorado has found in many instances that the revenue and advantages gained did not support the expenses involved in cleaning up the unexpected fallout problems of the business. That's all I have to say. Thanks for the opportunity. And I think you're doing a very good job bringing the public into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petrowski. Okay, at this time, and like I said, we can always come back if there are additional resident comments. But are there any council members who have questions or would like to make any comments?
I have a lot.
Okay.
First, I do want to say thank you. Being newer to council, I wasn't necessarily aware of all of the work that went into this. And so the last 2 years, I know everyone that's been involved has been really doing their due diligence. And I appreciate the turnout tonight. I mean, I think I've seen the numbers go up to 70 people. And so I'm appreciative that everyone has come out and expressed their opinions, and everyone was very well thought out, no matter what side you fall on. Everyone made really wonderful points. I don't know. The first thing I guess I wanted to address is there was a lot of talk about property value, and in our council packet that we received, there was an article on how legalizing recreational marijuana impacts home value. And so I think the study was originally in the Cleaver Real Estate blog. It would definitely need more research in terms of validity, but the key insights from this study show that cities that allowed retail dispensaries saw home values increase $22,888 more than cities where marijuana was illegal from 14 to 19, and that did control for population and home values. So I think that was a lot of the question, is what would happen to property values? And when I read that, I had marked it off because that was one of my questions. I certainly wanted to know, being a resident, how that would impact. I do think it has been a long process. While I know it's kind of ebbed and flowed, I would encourage us as a council to address some of the things that have come up tonight and vote as soon as possible. either way to make a decision instead of continuing to prolong the sunset clause. I would be interested for 4A that we're talking about how it's not necessary. I'm going to lean on the experts to update that. I know that we said a greenhouse isn't indoor use, but I thought that was a fantastic question if it's something that we need to specifically call out. I would like to know more about the I-1 district and 24, how that access is, and just to be very clear about that. And this may make me sound dense. I just want to be very, very crystal clear. If the village did approve recreational marijuana, would we need to go back and relook at medical marijuana? Or if we opt into recreational, could those facilities automatically offer medical marijuana?
Mario, do you want to respond to that?
With regard to your last topic, when it comes to medical marijuana, based on those adults that are allowed to enter the facilities for adult use purchases, that medical marijuana people, certified patients, because that's the process utilized under the MMMA, the original medical marijuana statute. Certified patients would just be allowed to go into recreational facilities and purchase their necessary product. It would be under recreational uses, and so in the end, the only aspect of a community that would not be capable of accessing medical marijuana from these facilities would be the 18 to 21-year-olds. It's been theorized that eventually they might eliminate medical marijuana facilities. However, that hasn't come to fruition because they haven't really come to an idea of how they could also service patients, certified patients between the ages of 18 and 21. Sometimes this is thought it might be dealt with by caregivers, but once again, that's not really been determined by the MRA, the regulatory authority.
Thank you. So I just want to be crystal clear. Like, it's if a medical patient went into a recreational facility, they would get the tax incentive or discount if they provided their card at any of these recreational facilities, correct?
And if they were over 21.
Okay, thank you. I am almost done. I had a couple of questions that I sent via email, and I just want to make sure we address it. So I'm going to go to page 5. It's D1, just so everyone can see what I am looking at. It says hours of operation, and I just wondered if anyone had any insight into why we were regulating the hours of operation, and wouldn't the market, in my opinion, I would see that the market would regulate itself. So I'm sure there was a reason why it was put in, and I just would like to know why.
Mo, you could answer that, or Mario could answer that, but I can tell you this: 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. has been sustained as enforceable hours. And we kind of waited around to make sure. Certainly, we didn't want 24/7. But I think Mo, from the Planning Commission perspective, or Mario from the Planning Commission perspective, or Jack, if you're still on the line, was there any real basis for 9 to 9?
I can speak from, I took those hours from my experience because I have created these type of ordinances for other communities in my role as a consultant. And so I did notice that those are hours that for communities that are attempting a first ordinance, that are introducing this to their community, the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. seemed to allow the business to have enough hours so they can be successful, and at the same time not basically drive traffic to a community if you're open later than, say, a neighboring community. If it's It's not necessary to say that all other communities will have their facilities closed at 9 p.m., but that was just the first attempt to see how they would interact with the rest of the businesses in the village.
And if you read the way we finalized it, the 9 to 9 just pertains to retailers and retail operations. The other hours are just have to be disclosed and would be reviewed during site plan. But the 9 to 9, I think, as we've currently casted it, is just for the retailers.
That's correct. We didn't want to prohibit growers, processors from having second shifts or third shifts if they chose to. It was only the retail aspect because that would increase vehicle traffic into these facilities.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, and then I have, I think, just one more question, and I am going to ask it with the very utmost respect. And this relates to D4, security requirements. Right now it says the buildings housing the marijuana facility shall all be equipped with security cameras approved by the chief of police. The chief may require review and recommendation. It puts a lot of power in our current chief and whoever our future chiefs are. I am just concerned that there's no time parameters. And while I understand our law enforcement is absolutely fantastic, I think that there should be some sort of clause in there about due process. And if we do move forward, that responses can be expected in a certain time frame so that it cannot stall out at that level.
Good point. Okay, I got that.
Thank you.
Is there Allison? Go ahead.
Thank you, Ashley. You brought up some great points, and I hope we can pursue them before we move forward. I would just like to thank everyone for attending our second town hall on the matter. I'm excited to see so many people participate, and I was, I wholeheartedly listened to your comments and will take them into account when I vote. I would like to thank the planning commissioners who spent so much time over the last 2 years, as well as staff. Kelsey Cook and Jack Curtis also used to sit on the planning commission, so put quite a lot of time into us, so I thank them. My opinion on the matter is, yes, you could absolutely, as others have brought up, you can go 3 miles to the south and buy. You can, your next door neighbor can have 10, 12. And as someone who grew up here, if I was one to partake, I could have figured out where to get it. So I do not believe us introducing, a recreational marijuana ordinance is going to all of a sudden introduce something that is, that cannot penetrate our boundaries. So yes, I would just, I very much appreciate everyone's time, to express their opinions and the time that went into drafting the ordinance.
Thank you. Councilperson Helmuth, do you have any comments at this time?
I'm just glad we had a lot more people out here this town hall than we did for the last one. I think everybody has great opinions, they have great points, but I will go back to my original statement that when I was learning all about planning, there's always lent to me the belief if the use is legal, you should try a place to put it. There are very few uses that allow in the village of Oxford. Heavy stamping, parks, and that's only because there's no place to put it. And the stamping, the noise, those are the only two that come to mind that we don't allow. And I think if we can find a place to put that satisfies the planning commission and the environmental questions and the safety questions, that it's something that we need to do.
Thank you. Councilperson Bourgeau.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to everybody who attended and for speaking out today. Thank you to the Planning Commission. You guys have put in a lot of work, a lot of great work on drafting this up. My personal concerns with the ordinance is just the fact that there's no limit. I understand that we limited based on the space. My concern is, which was mentioned before, there's a lot of money in the industry coming in from this, and there will be a lot of money coming to purchase property. And what businesses might we lose by that money purchasing a property to put in their business there so they can? How many businesses will we end out on Glassby Road? There's no limit. We could end out with 30 businesses. Yeah, you think that there's a general supply and demand concern, but that there's a concern based on the very limited communities that are passing ordinances. And so you can go through certain areas where the community has it approved and find business after business after business. So that concerns me about our little area, so close to residential homes, close to, the park. And that is my one concern, is just the no limits on the businesses. I'm not as so worried about a bad element coming in, but I do worry that we'll become swamped with businesses. Ashley, I did also think about that 9 to 9, and I Googled businesses and found that every single one I could find was open 9 to 9. Because I was wondering, it felt like it might be too early, closing too early, that we might have some legal pushback from businesses for that. But then I noticed that every single one I found closed at 9.
Thank you. I just didn't know, and so I didn't know. I appreciate the quick research into it. Thank you.
No, I came up with that question like last month when I was looking at it. It's like we were on the same wavelength with that. So that was one of the questions I was going to send to Bob, and then I noticed every single one. So my assumption was it was a state law. It doesn't sound like it. It just sounds like that's what most people are going with. But thank you for the time, and I appreciate it.
Could I just respond to your very, very good thoughts there?
Yeah.
Under the law, when you put in a provision that starts to cap, limit, or define the number of facilities allowed, you then are obligated to have some form of a competitive process to who you're going to select.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if we said, okay, we're only going to allow 5 facilities total, there's going to be a race to Joe's counter for applications, and then somehow the village is going to have to get into a scoring process or some competitive weeding process to pick the winners and the losers, to rank, let's say we get 25 applicants and we have to narrow it to 5. Then, we're in the business of picking winners and losers, which I did not want to put the village into that position. The other thing is when we should think, I'm not making a suggested change here, but we should think closely about the mixed use provision and whether or not allowing one of these facilities to coexist with an existing user, in other words, not lose a business, but gain a business, whether or not we do 2 things, whether or not we kind of camouflage the situation a little bit, and whether or not we are able to keep current tax-paying businesses and attract these new businesses at the same time. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that it would limit the proliferation of these facilities, and it might help blend them in to the industrial I-1 district without being such a glaring, noticeable difference. In other words, I think what some people have said tonight is they don't want to see the entire I-1 zoning box demolished in favor of marijuana facilities. So I'd like to talk to the village a little more about that, and I'd like to talk to Mario about that, if there's some sort of happy ground there. And I'm glad you brought that up because it made me think a little bit, and I appreciate that.
Do we have anything against neon signs? Are they allowed?
I can check for you
for
real quick and let you know in a second, but my first instance would think that we do in certain situations.
It's just a really common thing that I've seen in the like downriver where there's lots of neon signs on top of that, and I just haven't seen any on Glassby, so it's just another thought.
We are definitely allowed to regulate signage under the law.
Great.
For these facilities, and that can be part of our dialogue at the site plan.
Lori,
And really, the only facilities that would want retail that's going to look to draw people. All the other ones will try to be camouflaged, I would assume. Mm-hmm. But while we have a little pause,
I think you're right on that, Joe.
Yeah, and we've heard. I let East Council members speak up. I just want to remind them of where we are at in the big picture. The prohibition ordinance is in place with the sunset, I believe, April 30. So come next 2 weeks from tonight is our February meeting. At that February meeting, we have to do one of three things. Either go forward with this an adoption of some ordinance, then get it processed and in place prior to the expiration of the sunset, or extend or eliminate the sunset, because we'd have to then, any amendment to an ordinance takes two readings, so that would be at the February meeting and the March meeting, then it would be put in the paper for 30 days. So that gets us towards the middle of April. So only a few weeks before the deadline. So I just want council to be aware that in 2 weeks from tonight's meeting, something has to be decided, whether it's to, like I said, those options I just gave. So I don't know what direction I'll get. Perhaps we'll put all three items on the agenda that night, and you guys can figure it out on the fly. But a prohibition of the ordinance sunset, or an extension of the sunset, or an acceptance that the sunset is going to expire April 30th, but in its place will be an ordinance. I think those are the three options that you guys would really need to consider and be ready to take some kind of action on at 2 weeks from tonight.
Does the 2 weeks give enough time for the little tweaks that we've discussed making?
I'd defer to Bob on that.
Okay.
Can I ask, Terry, are you on?
Yeah.
How quickly, and I don't want to put any pressure on you, I just want to get a synopsis of what everybody's points were tonight. Because there's some things we want to check out. I still want to talk about from a park opening and all that good stuff, and we have time to do that. But I don't want to forget a topic. I don't want to forget a point. And my note taking is not what it used to be.
So what's your question?
Just how quickly we could get a synopsis.
A day or two. It's mostly done right now, but there are a few things I'll have to just make sure I have complete. So.
Thank you.
And I can share this recording with council members as well.
Thank you.
The last thing I want to do is listen to the whole thing again.
So I want to just ask a couple of questions of Bob, make a couple comments. So Bob, what's going on with the public parks buffer? We have a blank there. And is that a legally sound thing to have in there? Do we need to remove that? What's your recommendation?
No, I put it in there for the very purpose to which you just fulfilled, for you to ask about it. And I put it in there for discussion. No, we cannot go with a blank. I don't know. You know, I wanted to hear about this issue. I know Mo wants to talk to me about this issue. I don't know if it should be 500 feet. I don't know if it should be 400 feet. So I left it blank so that we would talk about it and I would get your feedback on it. My personal opinion is it should be 200 feet. My other opinion is the buffer from a park is not expressly set forth in the statute. The other buffer that you have included is expressly set forth in the statute. I didn't, you know, we've spent a lot of time trying to avoid irregularities, Kelsey, as you know, trying not to put anything in here that raises a red flag or unintentionally has a consequence that could be litigated. I don't know if you have a 500-foot buffer from all property lines of a park. How many I-1 properties does that then remove from an ordinance that is intended to make them permitted use areas? So I wanted, you know, I think that's an issue that we need to discuss, and that's why I left it blank.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a huge legal risk to have a park buffer. I think it needs to be discussed too. I think that there's no way we're going to be able to pass this ordinance in 2 weeks. We have too much to talk about. We have too many questions. I'm not saying never, but I'm saying not right now for many reasons that were brought up tonight and just concerns that I've had. So the homes around the I-1 district, particularly in the Scripter Park neighborhood, if I lived there, I would be concerned. It's just a fact, and we've heard that. We don't know what businesses will be going in there. You know, maybe they'd all be, you know, transporters or quality control operations. You know, maybe it'd be a big grow facility. Maybe there'd be odors released, even though we have, you know, ordinance language saying that that can't happen. You don't really know. As far as retailers and micro businesses, you know, those are the ones that are going to be more visible. And in regard to property values, I'm sure commercial property values would skyrocket because this is a big business and these people have a lot of money and they know what they're doing. They know, you know, they're lined up. They're probably watching this and ready to pull the trigger on offering the current businesses that are on Glacier Industrial Drive a lot of money to move so that they can move in. These are just my personal thoughts. You know, the issue that came up about having kind of like a marijuana, you know, cannabis row with every parcel being a marijuana facility, why wouldn't it be? Because the money is there to do that. And, you know, there's not a buffer that we can legally carefully put into place that would prohibit that. And so obviously if we're going to do this ordinance, I want to make sure that it protects the village, you know, to the utmost legal extent, but I think we learn something every day. I think you know, it's taken our village attorney a lot of time and consideration because there's constant litigation on this issue. I don't think we're out of the woods on that yet. So I'm worried about having the village of Oxford step into that at this point. As far as the revenue goes, the excise tax, I understand how that works. It's only from retailers and micro businesses that any money comes back to us, but it first goes to the state. And then, you know, the state needs to cover all of their costs and expenses for administering this program and overseeing the application process. And so they get paid first. This is my understanding. Then that pot of money goes to the various counties that have these businesses. And then, you know, it trickles down to eventually the village, but not at the exact rate that maybe we generated sales for. And so I don't see the revenue stream. So I need more information on that to think that if that's going to convince me and to go in this direction. I see the legal risk costing more than the potential revenue stream, and that really scares me for the village. So these are all, those are just my, I guess, initial thoughts. I've really appreciated all of the residents' comments. I think this is, overall, I think it's, you know, obviously a very successful business. You know, it could be a business that comes in and, you know, does put some buildings on some vacant lots we have, which would give us more, I guess, property assessed value. But, you know, also with the chief of police not being in favor of it, that speaks a lot to me to our village administration. This is a lot of work for them and oversight and risk. So I think that, like I said, I just have a lot of questions and a lot more discussion needs to happen. And with our sunset provision that we keep extending time and time again, it just keeps putting us in a pinch. And I know that we don't want this issue to just fall off the table and be lost, but I can assure you if we decide to rescind the sunset provision to take the pressure off so we can at least do this right if we're going to do it, I can assure you that anytime a council member asks for this to be put back on the agenda, it will be put back on the next agenda for discussion. And so I just want to really make sure we take the time, and I would have to get all the concerns that I just mentioned, explained to me and resolved in my mind before I feel more comfortable with it. Honestly, the location of it, I do think it is best in the I-1 district, but we have that new neighborhood right there now, and so that's something that can't be fixed. And so it's just a big point to me that was made tonight. So I know I've said a lot, so I want to allow additional time for any council person or any member of the public or our staff, or anyone from the township, any of our business owners, anyone else that would like to speak. I definitely want to hear from you.
Kelsey, this is Kelly Arkles. And I put a note to everybody that I want everyone to put their location. So I want to say it probably too late, but Thornhill Trail in Oxford. But I just want to say a couple of quick things. First of all, I want to thank you guys so very much for hosting this town hall meeting. I think it was so important to do so. I think a lot of great feedback come out of it. Kelsey, to your point in terms of especially the newest neighborhood that's on Glassby, I do worry about that. I live on Round Lake, so I worry about a parcel of land at 400 Glassby that has been available, I think, since the moment my husband and I moved in here. And it abuts the tree line and is so close to the park. And when I look at the site plan from 1998 that is posted on 400 Glassby, it does reach so far back from my understanding in terms of the residential area, which is the northern or the southern part of Thornhill Trail. So I just think that, or I would just request, if the council does not feel that they have enough information to make sure that established residents are safe in terms of what this will provide, please opt out until we can really make sure that this is the right thing for this small little community. But I want to thank everybody so much for their work and for this effort.
Thank you. Mr.
Thanks,
Renaud.
Kelly.
Mr. Renaud, do you want to speak again?
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. And thank you for your insight too on this that you've talked about. The basic points I want to make is what we've all discussed tonight. There's really no tax revenue from this endeavor, no matter what it would be. As you have in the ordinance, the capability of actually having growing operations, which we really haven't discussed here. We were just talking mostly about retail sales and other licenses that are allowed underneath the ordinances. So there's really no revenue other than the $5,000 fee you would receive, which doesn't outweigh all the risks that the village will take on. So that's the biggest point that we have to look here is that what's the benefit to the village to have an ordinance to allow this against what benefits we're going to get from it? There isn't. The downfalls are just way outweighing on them. The breakdown of the tax from the state, according to, I put it on the chat, it's 15% to municipalities with a marijuana store or marijuana micro business is located. And that goes across the whole state, and it bases it upon a scenario where if there's more businesses, they get more of the pot. Excuse the thing. When you got a $450 million, somebody said here, of sales in one year, that would be equivalent of 65 million possibly pot of the 10%. I mean, 65, excuse me, the 10% of that would be 45 million. So it'd be about less than 4 4.5 million, I think, of tax for the whole state to split up for all the municipalities. So it's really small amount that would be split to everybody to yield anything out of this. That's a lot of risk that we're taking on when we could just opt out right now and see if in the future the state decides to allow us to put our own local tax on it to make better funding for our services, our village, our quality of life, you know. So thank you again for allowing me to speak tonight. I appreciate it. And I yield.
Thank you. Let's see, we have another person liking to speak again from One Drop Brewing Company. All right. There you are. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to speak towards, I mentioned that I support this measure, but I do have to add that I support this measure with the best benefit of the village. And that first and foremost comes with this conversation of how this ordinance is written. When these things are written, this is the time to decide, you know, for the best of our community. And with that comes what kind of licenses are going to benefit this community. If they are the micro licenses, the ones that involve the same sort of benefits the community is receiving from microbrewing companies, that's better. I mean, compared to these larger growing facilities that come with problems of multiple stacking buildings and other occupancy uses, I see that as a challenge for the community. So if it is really good for the community, if tax revenue is being built through a micro license where something is from seed to sale, as the LARA perspective has portrayed this market thus far in many states, then I think it really does help communities, just like microbreweries help communities, because you keep it small, you keep it mom and pop shop sort of stuff, and that generates revenue for the community. If it's not going to do that, I'm not sure that I even would support it. It has to help Oxford. It has to help us with tax revenue that's local and is creating a local environment. So that really just keeps everybody safe. So thank you, and I appreciate the time to speak tonight.
Great, thank you so much. Next, KK again. I'm sorry, could you state your name again for me?
Oh, that's okay. Sure. Yeah. Hi, it's Karen Kamishek. Again, a village resident. You're welcome on Maple Street. I just wanted to again say thank everybody who's been involved with this process of doing the research, doing the planning. Obviously, a lot of time and effort has been put into it. And so I would just request that, I know that there's still some additional research and due diligence that you all probably need to do, but to continue to keep this a priority, just so it can be acted upon without too much more delay. Being a resident here for almost 20 years, I've seen other instances before where the council would just continue talking and talking and talking and talking and talking about topics and never really come to a resolution. So I would just urge you to not kick the can down the road for too much longer, but once you've, done whatever research is needed yet to answer your remaining questions and issues that are outstanding, I think everybody in the community would appreciate it being able to come to a conclusion sooner rather than later. But thank you again for all your hard work, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for your thoughtful comments. Are there any other comments from council members, staff, or residents? And I appreciate those who took the time to comment after me. I don't ever like to leave everyone with my opinion only. So I do appreciate that. Is there any other thoughts from Mr. Davis, Mr. Madore?
No, I have nothing except commend this village as usual. This was a great process, a great step. We have a lot to think about. I will do my best to detail in a memo back to all of you what I learned tonight and where I think what I learned fits into the draft ordinance, and get that to you as quickly as possible.
Excellent, thank you. Any other comments? I don't want to miss anyone, so.
This is Joe.
Joe, thank you.
I started talking, I was muted. So I just want to say thanks for everyone, for those who did take us up on the online form that was on the website. That was helpful. I know some of them came in later today that we didn't see till later, but those will be printed off and included and shared with council. And I want to thank some of the planning commissioners and stuff for showing up. I see Justin Ballard is still on here. I want to thank Jack for showing up. Again, it's an all-in effort here, and I know that 2 weeks from tonight, something will be on the agenda, and whatever the direction comes from council to us, we will do our best to make sure you have it in front of you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Madore. Yes, thank you to everyone. This has been really great attendance, especially considering it's an electronic meeting. I know we would have all preferred to be in person, but the safest thing right now is to do it electronically, and it seemed to work out pretty good. I think hopefully everybody that wanted to speak was able to. Of course, if you have any additional comments, please feel free to send them to us. You can contact our village clerk. That information is on the website, and we'll leave that up so you have that. If we have updates to the map or the ordinance, we'll surely post them as well and put notice out to the community as we go through the process. Thank you to the planning commissioners. You've done a lot of work. I started my civic service with the Village of Oxford on the planning commission, so this has been really interesting because I started drafting this ordinance, and now I'm kind of moderating the town hall to discuss it. So it's been a really neat process, and I definitely like being involved in the legal aspect of it naturally, and I think that it is a really good ordinance if we're going to go in that direction, and we can just hopefully we'll be able to work out some of the questions we still have and some of the concerns, and see if it's legally safe to draft around to some of the concerns that were brought up tonight or not. So you can rest assured that all council members, I personally know all council members are extremely thoughtful and really listen and care about what everyone has to say, including the planning commissioners, and they're the ones that are kind of doing all the work on this. And so, like I said, great to have them on, our police chief, our fire chief, our township supervisor, as well as our village manager and village clerk and everyone else. So thank you again. And I think at this point, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll just check once more with council. Any questions or comments from council? Okay. I'm hearing none, seeing none. So I would move to adjourn this town hall at 9:47 p.m.
Support that.
Okay, motion made by Cook, supported by Helmuth, I believe. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Good night.
Thank you.